This is going to be my final review of the Rel T9x. And just to let you know, I've been testing this for a couple of weeks now. I feel like I have tested it in depth, and I have made some videos about this. You might want to check those out to see some of my findings and my recordings. This is the final review where I just give my verdict. So yes, there'll be links throughout the video to those other videos I mentioned. But before we start, I'm going to talk about the specs of the Rel T9x very quickly if you're not up to speed with what exactly the subwoofer is. So first of all, it has a 300 watt class AB amplifier on the back panel. Now typically in the industry they're class D. Class AB is more the kind of audio file amplifier, though it doesn't really apply too much in subwoofers, but that's the general consensus. Not really true these days, but just thought I'd say that. There's no DSP, so if you want to adjust your subwoofer's EQ or anything like that and set delays, it doesn't have it on this subwoofer. The signal feeds straight into the sub and goes through a set of filters, and then out the cone it goes as sound energy. The next thing is it's a 10-inch active driver at the front, and then there's a 10-inch passive down at the bottom. So the active part is the part that's driven by the amplifier, and then the passive, that's driven by the forces within the cabinet, and that gives you a little bit more output, quite a lot more actually. The other thing about this amplifier is it has high level inputs at the back, and it also has an LFE RCA input too. The high level is a speaker level connection, and that is via the Speakon connector that they bundle you, Rel bundle you in the box. I believe it's a 10-meter long cable, which is quite generous. So yes, and it's a Speakon connector, which is nice, kind of quick lock sort of format, more kind of professional sort of cable, rather than just a bare speaker wire into the back. Also, there is an auto on-off function, which is useful if you want, the subwoofer to go into standby itself. And there is a phase switch on the back like most subwoofers have. It's only 0 degrees or 180 and no in-betweens. So that's the first thing about the specs. So now we're going to go on to the build quality impressions. Now, I was relatively impressed by the build quality, I think. I think the paint finish was nice. Like you get the gloss black, and I think they hand polish it or paint it 8 times or something like that. Yeah, I mean, getting up close, I did see a few scratches on the finish, like minor webbing that you get on car paintwork under sunlight, and that was brand new out of the box. And I'll talk more about that later. Yes, so the next thing is the impressions of the design. Now the design, I don't usually go into design too much on this channel because design is completely subjective. It's up to you whether you like this t-shirt or not, I don't mind it, but other people might hate it, other people might love it. Same thing with the design of the subwoofer. So, but I'm going to make an exception this time because I feel like the Rel, a big part of the reason why people buy Rel subwoofers is the design. Okay, so firstly, Rel make these subwoofers to save space and look good. And in some of the videos that Rel have produced, they're saying that they want it to look like part of the furniture. They want it to blend in with the furniture. So going by that judgment, by that statement, my judgment is the T9i, the outgoing model, to me it looks more aesthetically pleasing than the T9x. The T9x to me, it looks a bit too short and round. It's a rounded cabinet. But it reminds me of like a pit bull terrier or something like that. And I guess that's because the cabinet is shorter, it's been squashed down, and then you've got the big feet, they've been enlarged at the bottom. So it looks like a stockier subwoofer, even though it's shorter than the T9i. The T9i had these kind of dainty little feet and like a nice square box, and I feel like the aesthetics, the symmetry was better to my eyes. And also, if you look at the driver size as well of the T9i relative to the cabinet width, it looks more proportional, whereas the T9X's driver, proportional to the box, it looks very small and the box is quite wide. So to my eyes, when I had the subwoofer downstairs, I looked at it and I kept looking at it and staring at it for some reason. It just doesn't really look like a typical subwoofer. You might really like it. I thought it was a bit strange, but it wasn't bad. I just think the T9i was better than this one. So yeah, now other subwoofers in this price range, Kef KC62, I think design wise that is a lot nicer. And when you put that in the living room like I did in my previous video, it's barely noticeable. Like it will blend in, you won't even see it. Like, so I was very impressed actually by that subwoofer, how little space it took up. So yeah, the color of the feet, you know, I didn't really have a problem with it. My girlfriend didn't like it for some reason, because the cabinet was like gloss black, and then there's like these bright silver feet, and there's a lot of contrast between the two. She said to me, and I quote, she'd prefer the feet to be black or gunmetal grey. So I kind of see what she means. It draws your eye over to the subwoofer a little bit more because of that contrast. So yeah, another thing about the design, the Rel branding, there's branding all over this subwoofer. I'm not really a fan of that myself. I feel like Rel go a bit overboard with that branding. There's like a big crown at the front. There's like a Rel on the driver, the logo. There's a Rel on the a badge at the top of the cabinet. There's Rels all around the on the feet as well. There's 4 per foot, so there's 16 Rel logos on the feet. So there's like at least 18, and also on the downward driver at the bottom. So that's 19, you know, and then at the back as well. So you've got more than 20 Rels written. It feels a little bit like I'm getting kind of brainwashed or something like that, and that's all I can kind of say, to be honest with you. Yeah, it's not for me. It's not for me. You know, just do 1 or 2 and that's okay, you know. What about else did I like? I like the rear panel. That's my favorite part of this subwoofer, the rear panel. I like the blue kind of finish, like the teal, whatever the color it is, and aquamarine or whatever it is. I like the silver buttons and knobs and kind of the flick switches. That's really nice. What else did I like? The heatsink. I really like the heatsink. It's like a really high quality, and it's got like the teeth in between, which I really liked. Some other heatsinks that I've seen, they're just standard. So that's a little bit nicer. So yeah, the next 2 sections are going to be what I liked about the Rel T9X and what I did not like about the Rel T9X. So we're going to start with the positive, the things I liked about the Rel T9X. So let's start. So first of all, I've written here, the upper registers sounded less distorted to my ears than other subwoofers I've tried recently. So from about 50 to 120 hertz, that sort of range, the upper bass sounds a little bit clearer than bigger subwoofers that I've tested, as you would probably expect due to the driver being smaller and lighter. So yeah, I did hear that. The song Blue Monday by New Order has a famous repeating drum line. You might know it. It goes... No. That one. Yeah? So, yeah, that takes into account in the music. It's kind of higher bass. It's not sub bass. I felt like the subwoofer did a good job here and really blended in nicely with the speakers. And but to be honest with you, could this be because it was set up right? It's more appropriately sized for my room, and it could be just that, you know. But I thought it sounded good. 35 hertz and below actually outperformed my expectations. So there's a song, Mask Off, you might remember it, by Future, came out 4 years ago, I think. Now the Rel handled the deep bass of that. There's a very deep bass note in that track, and it handled it quite well, I would say, but very well for the size. More distortion than something like my PB16 Ultra by SVS, but I was still very impressed with it for the size. Some organ music. You guys like organ music? People buy subwoofers. Toccata and fugue, or toccata and fugue. by Bach on the organ. Listen to that, and I was happy with the very overall sound. I was happy with it. It's a dynamic piece of music, as organ music tends to be, and about 2/3 to 3/4 the way through, the organist really gets going, and basically you get a section with a lot of chords, a lot of notes, and that triggered my room modes. My room between 50 and 65 hertz in the subwoofer region anyway. Obviously, the louder it is, the more you trigger those room modes. So yeah, I kind of felt like without the DSP to kind of help me there, the Rel didn't really do its justice with that piece. So, but obviously DSP would have worked. Some people say to me bass traps, like in the comments, guys, bass traps, they don't work. Like, I don't understand why people keep saying this. Bass traps have to be 4 inches minimum thick, and they have to be away from the walls, probably a couple inches at least, up to about 6 inches away from the walls for them to do anything. And ideally you have to cover all the corners of the room, and you have to cover it from top to bottom. There's no living room I know on this planet that's going to be able to deal with this problem with bass traps. That's why we have DSP, so hopefully no one mentions this in the comments about with regards to this Rel, okay? Be realistic, okay? Be realistic, be realistic. A bit of a Rel joke there. Anyway, number 2, point 2, there's no Porch Off. It's very refreshing to have no Porch Off on a subwoofer, because that's a benefit of a passive radiator design. Obviously, sealed subwoofers don't have Porch Off, but they don't extend quite so well like a passive rad does. A passive rad is basically a ported sub, so you get a lot more around the tuning frequency, you get a lot more output. But with a ported sub, you get Porch Off when there's a lot of SPLs going, a lot of energy inside that cabinet, because they can't make those ports long enough really to do it justice. You can change the designs, you can flare the ports, you can do these sorts of things, but in reality, when that roll-off starts happening, you will start noticing the chuff more and more. Doesn't matter what sub it is on the planet. So yeah, great thing about that, it's a passive radiator design. What else can we say about this? Yeah, so I mean, Porch Off, people think, oh, it's not that much of a problem. Well, if you've got harmonic distortion, Porch Off is inharmonic distortion, you could say. I don't know if it's related to the fundamental frequency, but it's a sound like when there's no sound. Let's say your subwoofer is in the infrasonic region and you're hearing chuff, chuff, chuff. That's a sound that the subwoofer shouldn't be making. So it's an inharmonic distortion. That's as a result of the cabinet and the design of the ports. So yeah, that's why it's important. If it doesn't bother you, then buy a ported. That's fine. Porteds are fine as well. Number 3, another good thing about the Rel T9x was the dynamic power. Now this is the difference that I noticed over the T9i, and around the 30 Hertz region, I tested the T9i and the T9x in the same spot, and I tried to get them all at the same levels, and I noticed that the deepest notes, the 30 Hertz notes, that sort of region, had a little bit more of a slam with the T9X over the T9i. But this was only for dynamics. It was only like a sort of quick in and out of that 30 Hertz. If it was a sustained 30 Hertz, so if it was like in a movie where you get like a bass sweep, that's more of a sustain. Now that was the same between the T9i and T9X. I couldn't tell a difference, okay? But with the dynamic power, I'll say it again, the dynamic power, not the sustained power, there was a difference. I did record it on this channel. You can have a look at that video and you can hear it. Put a pair of headphones on, you will hear the difference between those two notes. So that is that. Will you feel the difference in music? You could do if the music is bass heavy. And I think maybe in movies it will be more of a benefit to you. But the difference isn't so vast. With the extra money, if you buy a T9i, you could buy it used or you could buy it end of line right now. You could buy 2 of those subs and then it will outperform the T9X with the dynamics at 30 Hertz. So that's how my brain is working that out. Now we're going on to the bad points of the REL T9X. If you're a fanboy, I would leave this video now because there are a lot of bad points. So yes, brace yourselves. The first one, funnily enough, first one is about cabinet shape. Brace yourselves. Now, I can't see any other reviewer mentioning this problem with Rel subwoofers. I have looked, I can't see anyone. And personally, I think it is at an unacceptable level. Okay, so I tested the Rel T9X on a variety of scenes. Now, one of the scenes was the interstellar wormhole scene where there's a lot of 20-30 Hertz kind of bass. I was listening at normal listening volumes, about 75 decibels, and my floor is pretty much flat. Okay, it's a new build house. They build everything very flat. All the surfaces are quite flat in this house compared to other houses. Okay, and the subwoofer was traveling round the room. And I understand it's a a forward firing design with a downward passive radiator, but this is unacceptable. Cabinet vibrations are also very strong at the top of the cabinet where that Rel badge is at the top. I put a glass of water on that, and I ran a frequency sweep, and the glass of water was like rocking back and forth like that, like a volcano. So yes, do you think that's acceptable? I don't think that's acceptable. I looked into the official solution from Rel. They made a video a while back, so they know this is a problem with their subwoofers. Their official solution is to get blue tack and stick it to the bottom of the subwoofer's feet and literally glue it to your floor. For me, that's not suitable because I move subwoofers all the time when I review stuff on this channel. And when you stick it to the floor, it takes a lot of force to get it off the floor, and then all the blue tack gets stuck and goes into all the nooks and crannies of the feet. It's just not cool. Okay, so a premium brand like Rel, how about brace the cabinet better? Don't let it do that. Don't let it travel around the room. I've had passive rads before in the past, similar sort of size, similar design, didn't move. So I don't think that's a very good excuse. Yeah, the T9i, that didn't move as much. It did move, but it didn't do the moonwalk around the blooming room. So yeah, the T9i was better at that. You can watch this in the videos that I did, or you can have a look at the clip that I've put on the screen already for you. Now, a lot of you are thinking, well, this sub is designed mainly for music, not for movies. Well, this is what's at the back of the subwoofer, theatre reference. So to my eyes and ears and brain, this is no way, shape or form reference performance in movies. I just will have to say this. Going on to the movie performance itself, it's just not dynamic enough. You'll get better performance from something like the SVS SB2000 Pro. I feel like that hit harder, and it's cheaper and it's sealed. So yeah, I feel like that was better, and definitely better, 100% better at the same price, or even less in a little bit less actually in the UK, is the SB3000 by SVS. That's way better. So I would rather buy that if you've got that sort of money. Paint finish. Now, here's something about the paint finish. Nicely applied, but there's visible webbing. Okay, scratches on the top. I got 3 units, 2 T9Is, 1 T9X, brand new out of the box. There's scratches on the top, all 3. Okay, so I'm not putting that down to, oh, it's just the law of probability and you got unlucky. No, all 3, that's a quality control problem. It should not be scratched out of the box. It should be brand new. There should be nothing on that cabinet. I don't care what anyone says. Number 3, confusing marketing messages. So there's a few things that I've seen from Rel, and it just makes me think like, what are these guys talking about? I'm very confused. So here we go. Number 1 is about their driver technology. Rel say that they make the lightest drivers in the business, and one way that they did this with the T9i, the previous model, was they bleached the driver so they bleached it white, They didn't add any color pigments to it. So they said something like that in the video. Okay, and the reason is because those color pigments add weight to the driver. So yeah, that's to save weight and to make the driver more responsive, and so you have less distortion. That is what weight does to a driver, yes, but I'm a little bit skeptical that color dye is at that level, but fine, okay, I accept that. Now, if you look at the T9X's driver, that black round the driver is back. The color pigment is there, whereas the T9i was bleached. So I'm not quite understanding why is it now okay to add that back to the driver. I mean, aren't you adding the weight back? So I couldn't find an answer for this. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the Rel badge at the top. Okay, it's a bit confusing, the marketing for me, because the Rel badge at the top, what's the point of that? Rel say the point is it's to reduce cabinet vibrations. Okay, you can see it on their channel, and I might put a clip on for you now so you can see. Now, that didn't really help when I ran the frequency sweep and then the glass of water was shaking like that. My XTZ, a similar subwoofer, it's quite similar in terms of power, probably a little bit more power actually, and it's half the price. That didn't rock a bit, so that was dead. So what's the excuse for that? I don't know what the excuse for that is. Now, the next thing, the other confusing part of the marketing for me was the high-level input connection. Now, Rel say that this is, they almost say it's their proprietary connection. They haven't actually said that, but the way they make it out is that no one else makes a, they say that actually. They say no one makes a connector, no one makes an input like we do, because we use special filters and stuff like that. And we use a Speakon connector. Okay, now they actually also argue that it's more high fidelity than a lower level connection that comes from the preamp. So the RCA that you plug in, they reckon that the high level connection is better quality than that. Now that, I just don't believe that's true. A higher level connection comes directly from the amplifier. The amplifier speaker level connection, the speaker level signal, sorry, is higher in distortion than the one at the preamp stage. And then even less distortion is the one at the mic stage. You know, that's how it works. The more, if you amplify a signal, you add distortion to it. So you can't say to me that something that's lower level is going to have less distortion. That doesn't make any sense to me. And then even then it's got to run through your filters and then go back through another amp. So I don't get that. If you're an audiophile, Rel, they advertise to audiophiles. It's the audiophile subwoofer brand, isn't it? An audiophile, from what I knew, they want to get close to the original signal. They don't want to, they don't want distortion, okay? So distorting the signal doesn't make sense. It adds color to the sound, and yeah, I mean, it makes the subwoofer sound a little bit warmer, and it blends well with the speakers. But the truth is, it's distortion, like it or not. Simple. And I tested this against RCA for a couple days, and yeah, I turned my speakers off and I was just listening to the bass because I am that OCD, and I wanted to find out exactly what it is doing to the sound. Now, the RCA was a lot better. It was clearer, the bass was clearer, it was more articulate. You know, why would I trust my amp's speaker? I mean, my amplifier, the signal coming from my amplifier that goes to my speakers, why would I want to use that bass? I mean, I'm not always even happy with that bass anyway. Surely just the actual signal is better. So yeah, it wasn't as good. Simple as that. I suggest if you have a Rel subwoofer, try it yourself. Turn the speakers off, listen to the bass, put high level on, crossover the same as well. You might need an AV receiver to set the crossovers exactly the same. And yeah, the crossovers are a little bit like slower rolling off with the T9X. So you can hear a bit more of like bits of the mid-range. I did notice that. Rel say that's something that helps them sound more musical. I mean, I'd argue with that, but I mean, okay, fair enough. But the bottom line is the bass is more distorted. So yeah, another confusing thing from the marketing is we don't use DSP. Our own filters are faster and better. So I checked this out. Rel claim that their subwoofers have filters built in, and it adds only 8 milliseconds of latency via their filters. And their top of the line one adds 4 milliseconds. Their reference subwoofer. Okay, now it's true, DSP subwoofers, there is a bit of latency. When the signal, it takes a little bit longer to get out of the subwoofer, let's say. So typically 10 to 20 milliseconds of latency. Now that can result in bass that's not quite in time, though the Rel isn't perfectly in time either if it's 8 milliseconds out. So now the thing is, how do you overcome that problem? You delay. So let's say your speakers are slightly ahead. Your speakers are slightly ahead in the subwoofer. You just delay the speaker and bring it back to the same time. There's a delay setting. With DSP subwoofers, you can set the delay if you plug the speakers in, and you can get it all matched up. Or if you have an AB receiver, you can set the distance on the AB receiver and get it perfectly synced up. So that's even better. So I still don't get that point. If you're running it pure direct, yes, I agree. If you're running pure direct stereo mode and you're not interested in anything else, I agree. If DSP is not for you, whatever. But no, I don't. It's not overall for me. So that's that. Another thing is if you use the RCA, right, input, and you have a DSP, you cross it over at 60 Hertz rather than, let's say, 40 Hertz or whatever, or let the speakers roll off. Let's say you cross it at 60 Hertz. You're saving your speakers from playing below 60 Hertz at high SPLs. So you're basically bringing more watts back to your speaker. Your speaker is able to sound less distorted and produce higher SPLs. So that's another benefit of having the DSPs, that you're able to muck about like that. By using the high level input, by not having the DSP, you can't do that. And that's not how professionals do it in the studio. Professionals use XLR connectors and they use the heck out of DSP. And that's how they make your music. So if you want to think you're better than professionals, then maybe you should make the music yourself. Okay, it's actually a bit annoying now. I'm at the point where I'm a bit annoyed because they use terms like you're mid-fi. If you go onto their blogs, they use the term mid-fi. Don't let the mid-fi guys tell you. Apparently, I'm a mid-fi guy telling you not to use the high level. Okay, so that's why I'm a little bit annoyed about this, because I just think it's at a level of misinformation that I can't stand. Anyway, the price is the other thing. The price went up for the T9X. It's £1,299, which is not far off the KEF KC62. And I personally think the KC62 is a better subwoofer for music than the Rel T9X. So, and a better sub even is the Dynaudio 18S. And that's a studio sub. It's £100 less than the Rel. You've got two 9.5-inch drivers active, and it's sealed, and it's 500 watts, and you have DSP, and you have a crossover that you can actually change, and you can change the settings for. And what else does it have? XLR connection, RCA connection as well. You give up a little bit of the fancy cabinet finish, but you get a better sub with more options. So, or you could go for an Arundel sub, 1961 or the 1723 for the same money or less. I'm testing one of Arundel's sub right now, and they're actually really good. So there's a lot of other options out there for people who appreciate music. It's not just Rel subwoofers that can do it. Number 5 is the paint. So yeah, you give people black gloss, you give people white gloss, but you don't give them any matte finishes. You don't give them any wood finishes. But you give them a red, Ferrari red. You wouldn't even say Ferrari in your video as well, because you're probably not allowed to say it. But you give people a red Ferrari finish, and yeah. I mean, it looks quite nice at first. It doesn't really match your living room though. It's a bit childish, but it's fun. It's blokish, isn't it? But that's all I'll say on that. You know, I just think, why don't you give people a wooden finish? You want it to match the furniture. That's what you said in your videos. So why not give us a wood finish? I have a wooden AV cabinet. It'd be nice if it matched. Anyway, number 6 is the Transients. Transients up high, they were fine. Okay, so like the kind of how in time it sounds, kind of the sealed subwoofer sound, if you know what I'm trying to say. But the lowest notes, they're a little bit less sharp compared to other ported subs that I've been listening to, like the XTZ1217 Edge, the SVS PB16 Ultra, the Arundel 1723 2V. These are better down low. Obviously, you can expect that. They're going to lose a little bit of clarity. But, yeah, I mean, the other thing is, a passive radiator design has a little bit more group delay compared to a ported design, definitely more than a sealed design, but even a ported design as well, when you compare like for like. So that could be the reason why, or whatever. I'm just kind of reading into it here. But it was just a little bit less kind of that tight sound that people say. There was a bit less of it down low, like sub 50 hertz, 40 hertz or whatever. Number 7 is a random thing. There's a piece of paper that comes in the box. It looks like I wrote it on Microsoft Word and printed it out of the home printer. It's like a terms and conditions. It doesn't scream luxury to me. I don't know why that's even in that box, to be honest with you. I've tested a lot of subwoofers and that was the worst out of all the subwoofers I've tested. In terms of like the documentation you get. I was expecting the Rel to have this fancy booklet, but okay, so I really like the knobs at the back. I remember I mentioned that earlier. They felt quite high quality, and yeah, I like the rear panel. It was quite nice. But I found that the clicks, you know, there's like these little micro clicks. At first I liked them, but then I listened a bit closer and I realized every single click via the high level, I couldn't test the other one because what's the point? You know, I just said it and then did everything at the receiver. But the high level one, the gain, every click is a big jump in volume, and I couldn't get it perfect. I just couldn't get the volume quite right. It was either slightly over bass or slightly under. So yeah, I mean, I feel like there could be a little bit more precision over that control. So yeah, number 10 is the word musicality. I see this word thrown around a lot with Rel. And yeah, the whole thing about musical subwoofers, it gets on my nerves. I understand speakers. I can understand they can be musical because they have to suit your room. They've got to adapt to your room. We're more sensitive to mid-range frequencies. We're more sensitive to high frequencies. We're not so sensitive to bass frequencies. Okay, so I can understand musical in that sense, but when you say a musical sub, I think it's too far. It's a transducer. It needs to be converting electrical energy into sound energy, and what we want is a bass that sounds not distorted. We want low group delay, and we want high SPLs. That's what we want from a subwoofer. To say one is more staccato or one is more, you know, the crescendo of the subwoofer, and this is a gimmick. Okay, I'm a violinist. Okay, I'm a violinist, and I'm telling you, this is a gimmick. There's no musical subwoofer. There's a good subwoofer and there's a bad subwoofer. There's musical comes from if someone plays the instrument musically. A subwoofer's job is to do the job. Here's the job, do it. Okay, so that's that. Oh yeah, and saying something like a SVS PB16 Ultra, you know, this is an SPL sub. This is not an SQ sub, as some people on YouTube say. Why is it why is SQ sound quality different to SPL? You know, 24-bit audio goes up to 144 decibels, 16-bit audio 96 decibels dynamic range. That tells me that the more volume you have, the more detail you have. There's more information in that file, in that If you look at the WAV file for a 24-bit piece of music versus 16-bit, there's more information there, and that comes from all those dynamics. How can you say to me sound quality and SPL are different things? They're not different. They're on the same scale. You can't say, oh, one is better quality, but it's at 60 decibels. There's no dynamic range left. How can you say it's a good quality sub? It doesn't make sense, okay? The PB16 SVS subs are actually really good, okay? If it has more dynamic range, it means it can output more cleanly with lower distortion. Simple. Okay, and another thing, I've seen your recent video. You're talking about the Rel Subwoofer and how it helps you to hear the violin, the gut bow on the violin, something like that, you say. So just to clarify this here, the guy in the video, John, is saying that the subwoofer, his Rel subwoofer, is making the violins sound like they're not made, the strings are not made out of titanium, but instead that the violinist is using a gut bow. A violin is not made from a gut. A violin bow is made from horsehair. Okay, it's made from horsehair. It's not made from catgut. The strings, yeah, the strings, they used to be made from catgut 400 years ago. Yeah, but they got rid of those. Why? Because they were too high distortion. They didn't sound very good. They didn't sound clean compared to steel. So what are you talking about guts for? Like, you know, what are you talking about? That's musical terms. When you're making a speaker, please stop this brainwashing of people and trying to make out that your subwoofer is a musical instrument. You know, I can understand to a degree it is, but it's not really, is it? Conclusion. The moral of the story is, as you know, in the hi-fi industry, there is a lot of snake oil. Okay, that's what everyone says. We all know it. To me, companies like Rel, they rule the roost when it comes to this sort of bad marketing practice. And there are loads of people on YouTube, reviewers, who support these Rel subwoofers, and I can't understand why. If you're being sent really good subwoofers, you know, out there's lots of brands. If you've been sent these great subwoofers, but then you're saying to me that a Rel subwoofer is better because it's better at staccato or whatever the hell you're on about, I can't see the allure myself, okay? A musical sub, as far as I can tell, is a sub that plays the music right. And yeah, it's about reducing distortion. It's about making it sound like the subwoofer that the studio engineer, the guy in the music studio, tried to match the sub that guy had. Yeah? Or woman. Try to match that sub. You're trying to recreate the sub that person had in the studio and how it sounded there. I know they definitely did not use Rel subwoofers. I guarantee it. Okay, now, yeah, and stop saying to people that audiophiles buy our subs. And if you don't buy our subs, you know, if you don't do Rel 3D setup, there's a Rel 3D thing, don't say that you're not an audiophile, you're not a hi-fi guy, you're a mid-fi guy. I've read your article on that. Don't say that. Okay, because true hi-fi is what's in the music studios. What they use is the true hi-fi. Just look at the companies like Genelec Audio, for example, or a great company, Neumann, that produced probably some of the finest mics in the world, and great studio monitors as well. Have a look at their spec sheets. If people tell me, oh, it's not about the spec sheet, have a look at the spec sheets, and they provide you all the hard data. Neumann, for example, they tell you everything. SPL at 1 meter, what frequencies that you're able to get at what distortions, 3% distortion figures, speaker polar patterns, everything. You get everything in those spec sheets, because they're selling it to a customer that don't want any crap, basically. They want low distortion, they want it guaranteed, they're putting it in their studio, they want to hear the audio. That is the definition of hi-fi. That's it. Okay? And when I buy a product, I like to be well versed in that product. I need to know what it is I'm buying. I can't buy something and say, you know, this is like the Dark Ages or something, when science wasn't allowed. This is like a religion. REL RELigion. How about that? Coined on Man Discovers Tech. Okay, so yeah, if somebody actually asked me what is special about the T9X, if I bought that sub and someone asked me what's special about the T9X, I would not know what to say. I'll be honest. I can say it sounds good, but I wouldn't be able to say with any science why this subwoofer is good. I just wouldn't know, because Rel don't tell me. There's nothing on the Rel spec sheets. I'd have to measure that subwoofer myself with a special microphone. Some of them can cost up to $100,000, the clipper ones, for example. I'd have to measure that subwoofer myself to know how good that subwoofer is. I wouldn't be able to do that. So yeah, and that's the end of that story. All in all, Rel T9X, it's overpriced, it shakes, it's not good for movies. The fact it's good for music is a made-up concept. If you get it to work in your room and you set it up right, yeah, it's good for music. You will make it good sound good for music, yes. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. If you like this channel, subscribe. If you want to keep going down the path of religion, you can leave this channel.